little introduction. I think a lot of you guys here at Discord know what's going on, but for any of our friends that are watching on YouTube or elsewhere after this event, we are doing an AMA today, and we've got our awesome CEO and creative director, Ted Peterson, with us. We've got our amazing producer, Victor, and our incredible design team lead, Michael, with us. They're each going to be answering a lot of the questions that you have for us. The way this is going to work, if you've got a question, you're in the AMA, go ahead and leave your question in the chat. You can find the chat in the top right corner if you're not familiar with that already. Show chat. It is slow-mo just a little bit to help us keep up with the questions that are coming in. We've got myself and Bella and a few of our mods who are going to be adding your questions to a Google document. I will go in, read off your question, and one of these awesome three guys is going to answer said question. We do have a couple of requests. We do ask to, resist the urge to meme in the chat as much as possible so that we can find the questions easier. And we also want to ask that if you have questions for Ted about his previous work on the Elder Scrolls, make them Daggerfall specific, as we are a spiritual successor to Daggerfall. If you want to find out more about Ted's work on the other games, he's done tons of interviews with other YouTubers, and you're more than welcome to go check those out. There's a lot of information out there. So, all right, let's get started. Very first question we have is from SNS Clip. How are you going to modernize first-person swordplay so it doesn't feel like I'm sliding around, swinging a sword or an axe? Also, will it be slightly more tactical? For example, Kingdom Come Deliverance, you have to wait for an opening to strike instead of spamming the attack button. Great question.
I guess you want to take it away, Michael, on that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. So in terms of modernizing combat, again, I agree. It has to be a level of not just feel like I'm just clicking a button and I'm seeing things happening on screen, right? We want combat to be a little bit more tactile in the sense of using either more of your keyboard or more of your mouse in terms of engaging the opponent, right? So that we want a little bit more like if we call back to Daggerfall mouse directional stuff, like we have concepts like that. Additionally, we're looking to have a bit of a resource system that is going to be used as currency during combat. So things that you can use to defend from an opponent, but also use to power specialized attacks to an opponent as well. So there's an extra level of tactician going on as well. I think we also talked about the idea of our kind of free swing, the idea of having the mouse be able to control the blade directly. We're working with that right now as well, and we want to plan to implement it for the EA. So I think all those different levels of things coming together can make a combat system that's a little bit more than just blindly spamming damage per section out, clicking the mouse, right? A little bit more movement, a little bit more thinking about what resources to use and when for defense, for offense, so on and so forth, right? So that's kind of the direction we're heading in.
Yeah, and then also the like resistances and weaknesses as well will come into play there. Like, are you using the right weapon for this enemy, that kind of thing. So you had a lot of strategy in there.
Yeah, great question. All right, our next question. I know a lot of people ask this on our Kickstarter as well. Oh, did we lose Michael?
Gone. His job here is done.
You had one question.
That was not the question. But on Kickstarter, a lot of people did ask, will the game be playable on Steam Deck specifically? Will the game be playable on Steam Deck?
It's something we've been experimenting with. I know, I think 2 people have gotten it running on their, our current build that we have, which isn't the full thing. So it's still up in the air. We'd certainly like to have it. We're experimenting with it. So stay tuned for a more definitive answer, but it's something we got our eyes on.
Yeah, for sure.
I am back. The hang up button and the mute button always confuse Michael. So.
Whoops. It's okay. All right, she was here. This is somebody that sent me a couple questions because they knew they weren't going to be able to make the live AMA, but they did leave us quite a few great questions, so we've got those to go through. What is the current status of the Wayward Realms? If you had to put a percentage on it, about how ready is it for the early access?
Seems like that is a question for our producer. I could offer a number. How ready is it? Like 15%. Like
Yeah, like
we've got a year and some to go. So it's definitely not ready for early access.
Yeah, it's really hard to like be quantitative with something like that, because like some system might be there in the super base form, like you can swing your sword at enemies, but the resistances, the damage points, all that stuff isn't in there yet. So it's like there's sort of combat, but not. It's like you can
Well, I
just
mean,
one click everything right there.
yeah, and I'll say that we had our admin meeting yesterday, and every team is ahead of schedule. So I'm not sure if like 15% or 20% or whatever, counts as being, where we should be, but we're faster than we should be. So, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, and I think just for additional context as well is that in terms of the game we're building, it's fairly complex. So when we say like it's this percent done, we got to think about bringing everything up in sequence with each other in terms of the systems, in terms of the art assets, sound assets, all that stuff, right? So, it's a bit of a like in terms of like bringing it up. We won't want combat super good, but then nothing else is built, right? That's not a great experience for people, right? So we have to kind of bring things up in series with each other, or else things will fall behind and not be good for you guys in the end.
Yeah, and for example, to add on to what you're saying, we know that programming can do thousands of people on the island, but we don't have art for all the thousands of people, so it's 1,000 identical people. So, like all of those things need to coordinate together to make the experience what we anticipate it being.
Very nice. Thank you. Next question from She Was Here. How is the pacing? Do you feel as though you all are keeping a good pace? Are you somewhat behind, ahead, or about where you need to be? Which I think Ted kind of covered this.
I was going to say, I think that yeah, we're ahead of schedule, but that doesn't mean that next quarter we might hit something that we didn't anticipate and get a little bit behind. So like any development, you go like, all right, we're blasting forward. Oh, so right now we're in a good stride.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only going to get more difficult and complicated as we go. So
yeah,
we're in the easier part right now.
She Was Here. About how far are you with completing the backer rewards?
I mean, I guess there's a whole bunch of different backer rewards, so it's kind of hard to say. But I know like portraits we've been really hammering out. Those are probably the thing we've been concentrating the most on at this point. And then of course we're going to be having like conversations with people about like their characters and artifacts and all that stuff that they're be designing. So that's a little later on. And then there's like Ted's novel, which he's been working on, and I think there might be a question about that later on down the line. So maybe we save that for then. But,
is that a back reward?
Some people purchased your physical.
Yeah, that's fair.
And actually the PDF was included as one of the tiers too.
Yeah, fair enough.
I will say there are a lot of you who have not completed your reward surveys too, and I know that because I checked the numbers. So if you haven't completed your reward surveys, be sure to check your Kickstarter messages and go in there and complete those, because there's still a lot of them that we're waiting on too.
You're making us fall behind. It's all your fault.
It would just be good to have, now rather than later.
Minimally, tell us what you want.
Let's see. There was talk of potentially doing another fundraiser campaign. Is this still in the works? What would a second accomplishment? What would that... I'm sorry, this question's worded a little strange. I think what they intend is, what would that accomplish that the first one was not able to?
Well, I think this one's really a question for you, Victoria.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this one. To put a long story short, I've investigated some European crowdfunding platforms specifically because we got quite a few messages where there were people that wanted to contribute to the first Kickstarter, but were not able to, either because their credit card or debit card or something of that nature wasn't accepted on Kickstarter. And we know that. And what we have found is that a lot of the crowdfunding platforms that I looked into were more of a charity-based thing, which is fantastic. But of course, it doesn't really fall into what we do. There's also the question of what else do you provide as a reward for people that are donating for an early access but didn't do the early donation, and therefore you don't want to give away the same rewards because you want to honor the people that got it first, essentially. So, long story short, we really don't have any plans for a second crowdfunding platform at this time. That's not to say that it's totally out of the question. We just don't have a good platform to do it on or good reward systems to put in place at this point, and therefore we don't want to offer that to the community because it's just not the highest quality that it could be, right? We have considered possibly doing like a PayPal system on our website or something like that, still for early access in the future. No immediate plans to do that, but it is a consideration. And I am actively every day working alongside one of Ted's old friends and experts in merchandise, and we are getting a merchandise store up and going for you guys. It'll still take a little bit of time, but we are really working on that.
And just to let you know, this friend that she's talking about, like she was responsible for like the Pip-Boy from Fallout 3. So like she's really good at merchandising.
Which ties in really well to the next question, which is a merchandise store was discussed. When can we expect that? The best answer I can give you right now is soon. It's still probably going to take me at least a month, if not longer, to really get that up and going, but sooner rather than later, for sure. Let's see. Our next question, Brendan Hester, 3729. How are you intending to add greater logical fidelity to your dungeons? One of the things that I always found charmingly confusing about Daggerfall is how you can go into a castle or stronghold that goes on for miles and is filled with bears and tigers. I've heard a lot about your plans to take away the sameness from Daggerfall environments. How are you planning to do the same with your dungeons? I love this question. It's a great question.
Yeah.
I can grab this.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, but I can also say that like the Daggerfall dungeons were not supposed to be like that.
So in terms of our intention for greater logical fidelity in dungeons, so I think it's a matter of breaking down your proc gen is the best way I can say it into different layers. The idea being some layers are stable, they'll never change. And some layers you can fiddle around with. So when you regenerate locations, things change based on what's going on with the greater world. If you wipe out a faction side of a dungeon, we can set flags and variables to allow for the dungeon to be repopulated later on, right? So things like that, right? Breaking up proc gen into components, then those components can inform each other and you can inject information into them, right? So I think that's one way we can make proc gen a little more advanced for this game coming up. In terms of taking away the sameness of Daggerfall environments, it really is how broken up you want to put your puzzle pieces when you put them back together, right? My understanding is that Daggerfall was using I believe it was entire sections of dungeon, like multi-room blocks was being used for Daggerfall, right? That's where you get a lot of the sameness. But if you break your environment down to rooms, or break your environment down to, or your generation down to little components, like pieces of floor, pieces of wall, pieces of ceiling, right? If you break it down that much, then your generation, in terms of what things look like, become exponentially less sameness, because your actual, like, your components are what's building out the build out, right? So that's some of the questions that we're talking about in our design. So
yeah, I'm doing the was it term always escapes me? L system collapse, is that it?
Wave function
Wave
collapse.
function collapse. That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. L systems.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah, using mechanics like that. That's a big one. There's also a whole bunch of other proc gen systems that we were looking at as well. So, and seeing which one can be used in each case use and so on.
And not all the dungeons in Daggerfall were proc gen. Like there were some we designed. So we'll be, like for really important dungeons that serve an important story point, we're going to create them handcrafted.
Yeah.
I did just want to point out a good reminder that Punch left in the chat. Try to keep memeing to a minimum so our speakers can see the questions. Great reminder. Do appreciate if you guys would do that. Next question is, when can we expect to see the next big showcase, rather that be gameplay trailer, clips, or live stream of the game?
Well,
Seems like that's for you.
I'll take it.
Sure.
Let's see. As far as the next big one, honestly, I don't really see a massive trailer coming out until sometime next year. But we do have some plans. Bella, who has been helping me greatly, she's in the chat as well. We've got some plans for maybe some little short clips just to show off what our team is working on, really. We want you guys to sort of see more behind the scenes stuff. Like, I'm always a fan of things like that, you know. So even if it's just like working on some 3D modeling or something like that, we kind of have plans for some short clips in ways like that. But as far as really long, like full-on gameplay trailers or something like that, it'll probably be a while. Probably going to be a bit.
Yeah, and I know we had said before we were trying to get another video out. In case you guys had missed that update, like it was something we just kind of kept pushing back because we're just trying to get everything up and going and stuff, you know, for since we're now in development. And it wasn't really like to the quality we would want it to be to do a video on anyway, so it just kind of felt like, yeah, we should just hold off on this till later. There's no need to rush it right now.
Ted, this one is for you. How far along is Ted's book?
It depends on, like, we're not onto another percentage question of like it's 15% done or 50% done. It's probably 50% done. But then there's going to be a whole lot of editing, and it's tricky to write a novel while as a prequel to the world you're developing at the same time. So you go like, yeah, like Victor knows that I like sent him the other day, like, what goddess is probably in charge of lightning? So like these type of things we have to talk out loud while I'm working on it. So it's probably 50% like as far as the actual writing, but maybe less when it comes to I'll have to edit the hell out of it.
The whole process overall.
Yeah.
Okay. Very nice.
Yeah, we got
Okay.
a lot of lore to sift through, so it's always something you got to keep coming back to. Is like,
Oh yeah, and I go like, oh, this character is going to be in the novel. How old were they at that point? And like, we're talking about a teenager or whatever. So like those type of things will adjust the book. And but I'm really having a good time writing it. So I think you could enjoy it.
I think it's further down on the questions list, but I did see a question that said something about like how deep and detailed is your lore. And very I think it's just
crazy deep.
yeah.
I mean, I think of my first Elder Scrolls game, Arena, and like we just like, oh, there are these different races, and there's an evil wizard, and that's it, basically.
So simple. All right, this next one is a combat focused question. Will defeat in combat lead to loading a save, such as the test games, for example? Or is it part of a story like in Dark Souls or Outward, and there are ways to get screwed other than combat?
So I mean, in some ways, we don't want combat to always be the end of the story. That's something that I'm particularly interested. Like, death is so final, as one of the quotes is, right? I think there will be death in the game. I don't think every time you're defeated in combat, you automatically devise a situation. I think that death sometimes is a consequence, and reloading saves is a consequence. However, I am interested in ideas of like, do you get captured? What are the kitchen like? So that puts you on a new quest line, right? That puts you in a new situation where you can use your skills and your abilities in a different way, right? I don't think we should always lean on one or the other all the time. I think there could be alternatives, but it's something that I'm definitely thinking about. Are there ways to get screwed other than combat? I don't necessarily understand that question, but we definitely have. There's definitely fun ways to have a rough time in the game. I think we are definitely one interesting challenge.
Fun ways to have a rough time.
Yeah,
Put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah, there we go.
it's also worth noting that we don't want to screw over players. Like that's our philosophy is about failing forward. So even if you might screw up what you were trying to accomplish, that's not necessarily a fail state, and you have to reload. You can keep going from that, and you can see the way that the world's going to react to whatever that outcome was. Sometimes it's in your favor, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could be both. Like you might upset one faction, but another faction really like that. So
very nice. All right, next question is about class styles. So, to what extent will a bard playstyle be possible?
Yeah, I was.
Things like, speech skills like charm and deception, performative actions, things like that.
Yeah. It's that I never thought about the bard playstyle before. I've made some notes in my features to look into that in the future. In terms of like performative, mm, I don't know about that. In terms of social skills and and having detailed conversation with people using an actual social skill system, that's something that we are looking into and developing. We definitely want the social aspect of interacting with NPCs to be just as rich as the combat side of things, right? We're building an interesting world with interesting lore, and we want to be able to have a system to be able to explore that more than just a passive. I read a book or I heard a random piece of information that was pre-written and sent to me, right? So something more engaged, and we think like a social encounter system is going to be able to do that for us.
Yeah, the performative side is really the harder part to
Yeah.
achieve because that takes time, money, all that good stuff to be able to first of all have say like the music or the poems or whatever, and then as well like implement with animation and stuff like that, and that's really probably very much outside of our budget.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, the only maybe workaround would be if we did it via text boxes, where it's like you
Yep.
put on a performance, is how the crowd reacts, fade to black, and a few hours have passed by or something.
Yeah, I have put some I put something in my forward looking notes for when we get to that. That's something I didn't think about that before. I didn't think about that style of play style, but I've made some notes in maybe for future considerations. So I definitely am looking. I'll look into that in the future. So it's
But
interesting.
certainly any of the social stuff,
Yeah,
like is something that we've been talking about all along.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
Nice. We've got some multiplayer questions, both from Alien Bo, I hope I'm saying that right, and Murray Man. Basically asking, they've heard that co-op was mentioned and are curious about how we see that working or how it currently works, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so it is something we are still planning for the full release. Won't be there at early access launch. But basically, what we really want is just sort of a drop in, drop out kind of system where there's a host, they invite their friends join them along for the adventure, whatever. But all the information, the relationships, all that action, that's only going to be affecting the host world. It's not going to be affecting the other players joining in, and that lets us just kind of keep it nice and clean. Um, the other players would get to like keep some items and gold or whatever that they earn, but otherwise we don't have to worry about that nightmare scenario of trying to blend people's worlds together.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got some magic system stuff next, from YB and from Alan Bow again. How much depth will the magic system have, and what's kind of the ideal scope when you consider things like rituals, point and cast, glyphs and runes, things like that?
I guess I'll take this one.
I was going to say, I think it's for you, dude, but it like the deeper the better.
Yeah, and I agree. We're looking for a. I mean, obviously, for the EA, when we offer the EA, it's not going to be as deep as we want to go, right? There's obviously constraints for time and effort and cost. But we're definitely the intention is to have a fairly rich magic system, having something that players can engage with, either as a focus build, but also as a flavor for any other type of build that's out there, right? And also the potentiality of people just not picking magic at all. We also want that to be viable. It's a we want it to be a, I guess with high aspirations, that we want magic to be a much more creative system and engaging project, right? I mean, Daggerfall has a spell creation system. That's something that we definitely want to carry forward. We found some interesting, innovative ways to kind of make it more
Which,
complex.
by the way, was unique in its time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's very little parallel today, even in terms of like tabletop games, in terms of matching that level of like experimentation and play and just finding things out, poking a system in depth and getting interesting new things, right? We want to have a system with that depth. We have a system where players can pick up different magic effects, be able to combine them, being able to make interesting outcomes, things that work, things that don't work, things that are viable, things that are just screwing around. Um, That's kind of our main aim for the magic system, right? That's our top end goal. In terms of when it comes to specific scopes, I can't really dive into deep right now. We're still scoping it out. We're still figuring out what the boundary is, mainly in terms of what's available for the EA and what's going to be available for the full game and past that, right? But the idea would be that my ideal scope would be something along the lines of, again, that very interesting magic creation system that allows for players to play, and some other type of ways to use these magic effects just as quickly and efficiently, right? Like not like both a way for quickly utilizing magic and something where that deep explorative play with spell effects. That's kind of the ideal. So
Okay. Still on the magic system stuff, Necronut has a very fun question. In Daggerfall, it's possible for me to create spells so stupid that I can obliterate myself in hilarious fashion. Will Wayward Realms give me the irresponsible amounts of power?
yes, that that is the no, that is the dream. I think it's that's a philosophy in the magic system. Like you can make a stupid spell. Like I want to have 100 damage touch. That's my on fire. Thumbs up. Yes, do it. Please do it. It'll be great. We want to. We cannot have the exploration and the creativity and not have consequence, right? The consequence is almost in some ways the best part of that type of system, because you're just screwing around, you're just experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and having fun with the system. You can't have fun without a little bit of mistakes or failures or irresponsible or quote unquote irresponsible amounts of power, right? That's something that is built in with the magic system. We want people to make mistakes, both in the magic system, but also yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
go on. No, I was
was
going to say
yeah,
it falls in the same category as mistakes in combat.
yeah,
Of like we're like a good GM. Like if you do something kind of crazy, but it's interesting, then we're like, you know what? There's a team of wizards who are watching you and going like, oh, dude, don't do that. Okay, well, we're gonna rescue you and like bring you back to health, and maybe you'll learn your lesson. And so we and then new quests are off as like, oh, this guy's a crazy wizard, and maybe people are going to look for crazy wizard. So like we definitely want to continue the story forward after a failure.
yeah. Yeah, and like, I was going to hit on the exact same thing. Like the idea of this experimentation and embracing mistakes, embracing failure is kind of built into the myth of the ideal of the entire system. Like you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to experience mistakes, and then have something interesting come from it, both in the magic system, for stealth, for combat, for social, for the other systems that we have in development. Right, like that's the kind of the like that magic is kind of the most plain example of it, but that philosophy kind of is a run through of the entire system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We've got some melee questions. Kind of next up on the list, we've got from the Willable. Will contact hits be based on dice rolls?
No.
No.
No. It's going to be. We kind of want to. I guess I'll make a quick aside because it will come up. The idea is that we're kind of downplaying the randomness in the game. It's done for a couple reasons. One is that we have the engine now that we can run slightly more simulationist systems, so we can lean into that and enjoy into that. So, example, your blade velocity and your blade vector will play into damage, right? Meaning that you're now encouraged to play around with movement, like I was talking before in combat. You're encouraged to play around with free swing or with dodging around or being interesting, right? There's now meaning to that. The second is that because we have a much more chaotic world, a world that's constantly evolving, constantly changing based on player decision choices, but also just the simulation in the background. There's no need for the randomness of dice rolls, because in some ways the randomness of dice rolls is really great when you have a static world, right? Everything's that that chest is a level 50 chest and will always be a level 50 chest, right? And therefore the randomness of the world becomes in how many times you need to pick it or how much resources you use, versus you don't know what that chest is going to be. Then it becomes the randomness has already been happened because it's been spawned randomly in some ways, right? The world conditions have collapsed down into the object, right? And therefore your skills can be applied better. So that's one of the other kind of philosophies around no dice rolls, is that we have a bit more of a chaotic world, a bit more random world. So the randomness has already been taken care of, so we can have more. Then we can lean into our simulation systems, and combat's just one example of that.
Love that.
Well, and the other tricky thing on combat is, probably on any system, is the difference between player skill versus character skill.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
we've also got some questions on will damage depend on a body part hit or the armor that's worn, maybe?
I don't know about body part hits. I don't think we're that specific. I think it might play in a little bit. We need to give me some time on that. That's something that we're toying with right now. Again, it's a question of how deep of a simulation do you have to go to get a rewarding experience for the player, right? Like
but certainly armor is
armor for sure.
going to make a
Armor
difference.
for sure. Yeah, armor for sure. Yeah, armor and shielding and stuff like that, and dodging and blocking. Seeing some stuff about dodging as well. But yeah, it's something that I need to cook a little bit more in terms of mainly it's how rewarding is that going to be for body part specificality versus just players playing it, right? How deep do we down the rabbit hole do we go for that, right?
Also, one more thing on the armor again, that the resistances and weaknesses comes into play again there as well. So.
Yeah. We did have somebody ask about dodge mechanics as well. Solid Sneak has asked any plans for dodge mechanics, which of course you kind of mentioned. So
yeah, I love the name, by the way, Solid Snake. Yeah. In terms of dodging mechanics, I don't necessarily means if it's like a roll out, like you just kind of like dive away from the player or something along those lines, but definitely how you're positioned, how you are moving, how you are reacting to the opponent is important in terms of like how combat plays out. So
okay, we've got one about blocking as well. Underscore RN will the game have 100% block with shield, or will it be like Skyrim where damage is reduced?
It's not necessarily going to. I don't see 100% a shield as a perfect thing, right? The resource system that we have kind of developing is looking at how you get worn down in combat. Like it's not about just I'm going to be perfect and I block 100%, right? And that's where we stand, right? It's going to be as you're engaging in combat and in other things too, right? Engaging in the world, you have resources that you need to use defensively and offensively, right? And you may block it with your shield, but some of your defensive stats are going down a little bit, and that will add up over time, and that makes you more open to power attacks or special abilities, right? If you're always blocking, you're getting worn down. I mean, carry a heavy shield and take hits. Your body is going to react to that, right? And so we're working on a system that kind of has that in mind. It is going to allow for then, if you're just wearing the shield down and down and down, you're now more open to a sneak attack or a power attack or someone plowing through you, right? Because you've burned your resources just on that defense and not found a way to spend it or find other ways to mitigate that. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of more engaged systems, right? It's resource spending and resource management in the combat.
Yeah, also, very much worth noting that we have both a health and a guard system. So you're not taking direct health, you're taking damage to your guard, and once that gets lowered, then you take actual health damage, and that's when it's really bad news.
Yeah, that's serious. Yeah, it's not just hit points.
Well, unless there's magic involved.
Yeah, always. Yeah, but exactly. Like guard is one of the resources. It's your defense in some ways, but the other resources play in that too. But yeah. Once it's gone, you get hit with an axe to the chest, fair open. That's just not 5 hit points reduced. That's something else going. There's something going on there.
I'm looking forward to the day that I'm playing the game and my health is just draining and my guard is totally up.
Yeah.
Find a way. Let's see. Question from Grimorse. What are some of the overarching gameplay design ideas y'all plan to keep Melee fun, fresh, relevant as gameplay progresses? So they listed like weapon masteries, skill, weapon combination, uniqueness, dual wielding, etc.
Yeah. So for that, like I said before, one of the things is going to be obviously our control and our resources, right? Using the keyboard and mouse more effectively for dynamic combat. In terms of keeping it fresh, obviously we're looking into how you master weapons, abilities, like feat-like structures, familiarity with specific type of combat methods, possibly weapon styles. But again, we're cooking that right now, finding what's the best combination for players to play with, right? So it really is going to be really the philosophy would be keeping it in the moment combat is interesting and fresh and engaging, right? It's not you're not going to. I don't want players to become very rote in how they engage with. Oh, I am killing the 50th bandit. It is the exact same as the other 49, right? It becomes so you have keeping the brain working on the strategy. Okay, this person has this weapon set, this shield, and this type of weapon. Okay, I got to think about it this way. I got to move around physically instead of standing there swinging. I got to think about my resources. Got to think about my special abilities. It's
and the AI and
yeah,
personality of the person you're
yep,
facing.
exactly right, because they're not going to behave the same based on some things we have with NPCs. So I mean, I think it really much for me will be that focus on in the moment, having a little bit more cerebral experience, right? So it just not becomes a rote experience. Just I'm going to swing until HP hits 0, and then I get X loot, right? We want to make a little more context, a little more engaged than just like that simple, very little loop, a little more engaged loop, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. We've got a question from Elthared. With the late pledges, will that also include more game features if it passes certain milestones?
Yeah, that's one that's been asked a lot, and it's always a bit confusing. But no, those features would have been in the early access launch if we had reached that stretch goal. With it already being, like a couple months down the line, we wouldn't have the time to implement that, even if we do reach that mark at some point. But uh, it's not saying it might not make it. There's a chance, but we're not promising anything.
I was going to say, or certain plan is to under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We've got Orderu. I have no idea how to say that. Has a beta test date been confirmed yet, or does more work need to be done? Yeah, he's got two separate questions, but the first one is, has a beta test been confirmed yet?
No, we're just aiming for late 2025 at this point. As we get closer, we'll be able to narrow that down more for you guys.
Yep, for sure. And will there be a pet system in the game? I know I've seen this question a few times too. Like direwolves, cats, birds, creatures that'll fight alongside us during adventures. And I think I saw somebody else post a similar question asking about like snakes, dogs, cats, all that kind of stuff.
We do intend for obviously we intend for a companion system. Like that's kind of would be a big omit if we didn't include that. In terms of the first release or the access, we'll see about that. I'm not really too confident about that specifically, but in terms of long term planning, I would love to see some type of animal companion system. I think that's something that's very doable. It's something we already have quasi plays out with NPCs being companions. So taking it from a dude to a cat isn't that much of a massive leap to make that happen. So I should put that in actually. I'm going to put that in my notes because I don't think it's been explicitly stated. I think it's been implicitly, but I'll make that explicit in my notes right now.
Love it. All right, we've got someone who is asking, as someone who has a love for sandbox RPGs, I love seeing the world move and grow without me doing anything. How does the world progress? Is it based on quests that you do? Are things just constantly happening? Also, in what ways can you interact with the world more in depth? Is it romance and marriage systems? Can you buy and own property or towns? And then they also asked if there was a companion system, which of course you've kind of covered.
Yeah. Want me to take this, Victor? Ted?
Well, I'll say a few things on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as like how the world will change around you, definitely quest is an obvious one, right? As the whole point of the game is the whole interplay between the factions and who's coming out on top, and right, who's growing their territory, who's getting into power. So that automatically, you see some changes from that. But we also have the world events that take place, and those I kind of like to describe them as sort of like the big major plot beats in a main quest. Since we don't have a main quest, the world events kind of take that place. And so these are big things that are happening in the world that like have a big effect on it. And with those, you don't have to interact with them if you don't want. You can just see the way that they play out. So that one's definitely the biggest way that you'll just sit back and see how that world is changing. And then was there another part of the question that we didn't answer?
They were asking just all the different ways that the world will interact, and then they did ask about the companion system, but Michael kind of already covered that.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm just reviewing the question one last time here. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, yeah. You can choose to interact or not interact. You can choose to engage quests or not. Obviously, the intention is that you're engaging in the world. You're not just standing still. You're actually doing stuff in the world. And the plan would be as you do that, you will be impacting the world. Like even a little butterfly wing flap will eventually roll out, right? The idea that you will have some impact. It may not be major impact as to the world, how things play out in the world, but you will touch onto the world. And again, I mean, people can meta a bit and dive right into the deep part of the plot, which is exactly what we want them to do, or step away and do something out in the far corner, not really, engage too much, right? It's up to the player. In terms of things like romance, marriage systems, that's part of NPC companions. We would hope that we have a little bit deeper engagement than just, hey, you go there. We want something a little bit more deeper than that is our hope. And in terms of owning property, I don't think we really have conversations about that in the back end, but we might. I don't remember that, Victor, but
It's just the player housing.
Yeah, just player housing. Okay, yeah. So
yeah, I know we've talked to the community a bit about like you can't be a king or anything and own lots of land, but you have your own house and or a ship that acts as your house and things like that.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got a question. Are you going to have time limited quests?
Yes.
Yes, where they make sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Just
obviously.
Like
Sorry. Go ahead, Victor.
As far as like making sense, if somebody's dying and they need a special herb to get better, that's obviously time limited. If somebody just wants 10 flowers, take your time.
Yeah.
That
was a major feature of Daggerfall that we're kind of bringing back, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, again, yeah, obviously it needs to be tempered. Like, obviously it needs to be something
Improved.
thought out. Yeah, but also something that needs to be like thought out. Like, obviously we don't like not every quest will have a time limiter. Some quests will not have a time limiter. Some quests will be designed in such a way that allows for the player just to use it as an excuse to explore the world, right? And eventually achieve a goal and come back and not be under the clock. Whereas other quests will be very much under the clock because with the level of urgency, right? That's something that we can modulate, thankfully, that we don't like we can go from 0 to a lot, depending on how intense we want to make things. So yeah.
Okay. I like it. I love time limited quests personally, so I'm very excited about that.
It's good until like you're under the gun.
Yeah.
Which, it is, but it also forces you to like pick a priority, you know what I mean? And
sure.
And not just have your journal.
I mean, even in Daggerfall, we did do a thing where we would trace like the right amount of time, even on slow travel, to say like you have to get to this dungeon. Might take you a day or two in the dungeon. Like we would mathematically figure out what the right amount of time was, but things can go wrong, and you can fail a quest because they're looking for something in some amount of time.
It's a good point to bring in the scale of the world, which is something that we often get asked about too. Like, why make it so big? And part of it is just like to have that real time scale, and you'll feel that pressure when you got to travel for like 3 weeks and your deadline's coming up. And
it also forces players to like consider how they're doing things. Like if there's no time limit, you engage with a quest much differently. Even if time is like, hey, you got to get this done in a year. Even that makes again, we want the players to think about how they're engaging in the world, right? What their priorities are, but also in terms of what the quests are in priority, but also what they're actually going to do with their time. Like if I'm traveling somewhere, I can do it leisurely. I can do it much faster. I can just barrel through, right, depending on what my priorities are, right. So it kind of allows for the player to have this big world, but also engage with it on different levels based on how pressured they are, right? And what it is pressure based on what they want, because they can choose quests and not choose quests, right? So,
yeah, for sure. We've got some questions from Riffrit. Will there be a substantial amount of unique items found in unique places in the world?
Like what we would call in the Elder Scrolls artifacts?
Yeah, I assume that this question's referring to like magical weapons or maybe somebody's unique dagger or a unique chess piece, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think so much in unique places. Like we definitely do want some unique weaponry and armor and stuff like that you can find, but we want to sort of disperse that through our proc gen system as opposed to building a specific dungeon where the specific weapon is found. That's the part where Michael was saying we have that randomness element there that's going to shake things up as opposed to knowing you can always beeline to this place and get this sword or something like that.
Yeah, I do like that. It starts to make it a little bit more interesting. I guess you can find like a bajillion videos on YouTube now about where to find said item in specific game and things like that.
Yeah.
We've got will NPCs drop the armor and weapons that they are visually wearing? So if I see somebody with a interesting sword, are they going to drop that item?
That'd be nice. Just because you asked it, I might just say, "Hey, no." Yeah, it comes down to
Michael, you're a jerk.
I know. I can be a pretty brutal game master at times. In terms of I think we want to keep that consistency. Obviously, if you see something on a NPC or on an object, you kind of want that consistency of it existing when you look into the inventory, right? I think it's more really a question of when we spawn things in, like, is the loot table spawned with the NPC or is it spawned after the NPC dies, right? And having that consistency through. It'd be nice. I think I would want to limit that level of like inconsistency as much as possible for inventory stuff, right? So that's what I would say for that.
And there is also that element of just because you can loot, like say somebody's armor, depending on what race you are and what race the NPC is, that might not be usable for you unless you take it to a smith and get adjusted. So there is still like that sort of cost as opposed to you just being able to, gear up immediately.
Yeah. We've got a question. Will a physical copy or perhaps a collector's edition be available for purchase?
Oh, I hope so.
Should I say that?
Something we would love, but yeah, it's a
that would be really cool. I don't know if we've even talked about it because it's 2024, and
we actually did for the Kickstarter a little bit. It was a idea floating around. We had considered creating a collector's edition to be available for the Kickstarter, but ultimately we had not had any merchandise plans underway, and we really just weren't ready to present something like that. But
can we do a floppy dish version?
Wow, you're really going old school now.
You can buy them, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point you can buy them in bulk, so it might just work out in terms of finance.
That's right.
Well, that's the way it's going to have to be because it'll probably take like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There are no like guaranteed plans for a collector's edition yet, but I think all of us on the team would love to be able to do that. So I can certainly see it being something that is available in the future for sure.
Yeah, it's like being a musician and going like, I'd like to have an album, like a physical vinyl album.
Yeah, like a record. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Well, it all depends on costs.
Yes.
Right now we're still just on SoundCloud.
Right.
Let's see. We've got some interesting questions from Inquisitor Duncan. How will you handle player choice? Should decisions have weight, and should the game let players fail the same way Daggerfall lets you miss the main quest if you miss the time limit? Will bad or evil decisions open up new gameplay styles?
Yes.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Victor. Go ahead, guys.
Well, I was just going to say, like, yeah, that's really important to us. Obviously, we already hinted at that, talking about the, the impact and stuff. I kind of want to touch a bit more on morality, and I'll hand it over to you, Michael, to cover the rest more. But like, as far as say like evil playthroughs, we aren't doing so much like there's no karma system. There's no like exact good and evil. It's more of a perspective kind of thing. So depending on your faction that you're allied with, this other faction might be evil. But if you're allied with them, well, then this other faction is evil. So, as far as
if you're a fucking psychotic and you just like run through and like shoot fireballs at everyone, then yeah.
Yeah,
There's
like,
going to be
like
consequences.
you're not limiting people's actions, so you can always go and murder an entire town if you want, or try to at least, because it'll be a lot of people. But but as far as opening up new opportunities, it's really just going to depend on who you're allying with and what their
Yeah,
motives and goals are. And then,
yeah,
Michael,
yeah.
if you wanted to touch on the rest.
I think that's yeah. I mean, we want to have a system that is allowing for players to have freedom of choice, and freedom of choice means making decisions that us as writers and designers may not agree with or may not intend for, right? But it's about having a system that's a bit adaptable and being able to pick up on changes, pick up on player behavior, and be able to carry forward. Like for example, if you go and you murder that town or attempt to murder half the town, yeah, bounty hunters and Kingsguard may start seeing you as a threat and start coming down on you, right? You may have new opportunities based on your behavior, right? Doing certain things may open up doors for new factions, may close doors on others, right? So there. The idea is that it's a bit dynamic going on. So it's a bit dynamic, and we want to lean into that dynamic, allowing players choices to really like ramify out. So we're thinking about systems that will allow for that and detect that and play into that.
And I would add that there is a difference between if you're really sneaky and you just want to kill the whole town, but you're like hidden away and you're a great archer and you're hanging out, and if no one catches you, you're fine.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about like lock picking something, still not being seen, but turning around the corner and there's a guard staring at you.
Yeah, like if you're good at it and you're just like, yeah, I'm just walking into this place that I have the key to, and they're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
That kind of leads us perfectly into the next question, Ted, actually, is will there be a type of reputation system or reputation tracking? They put, for example, I killed the villagers in a town or members of a race that then that government or race should try to take revenge against me.
Yes. I can expand on it, but yeah, the overall thing is like, yeah, we're tracking your reputation. Why does this person hate you or this person like you? We actually had that in Daggerfall, 30 years ago, but we didn't communicate it very well. So a lot of it is just kind of, expanding on that and making sure the player knows that, in some way, some NPC telling you, or however we do it, that, all right, this action you did is going to be a problem with this faction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've heard you say in the past, Ted, you kind of, you guys did that a lot in Daggerfall, but it wasn't set up in such a way to really tell the player that information all the time, right?
Yeah, you just show up in a little village and everyone was like, "Oh, we hate you," and you're like, "Why?" And it turns out you did a quest for the Knights of the Rose, and that pissed off a different faction, and like that was again 30 years ago, already done, but we didn't communicate it to the players.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, that's a simple solution. We can just make that better to make it clear what you did made a difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Let's see. We've got a do you plan on supporting the game with paid DLC or free updates after the full release of the game? DLC was a dirty word in 2014, but since then, I find more people support DLC and hate live service games or cosmetic only purchases that don't expand on gameplay.
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on what kind of DLC, because we don't really want to do like those cosmetics or an armor or something like that, a weapon. We'd rather do like a proper expansion.
Seems like you were getting really close to Bethesda.
I would never say anything like that. But yeah, no, like we would like to do it as like a proper expansion as opposed to like the sort of microtransaction DLCs that you see nowadays more. As long as we got a good amount of content, good amount of story to tell in there, then we're all for it.
Yeah, so instead of just like a few items being added to the game or something like that. We're talking about like a full-on, release of a new map, a new quest, and new characters and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, we've got some modding questions. How moddable will the game be? Do you plan on making it easy for modders to create mods? If there are mods that significantly improve systems or gameplay beyond what you originally envisioned, would you make them a part of the vanilla experience with modders' permission?
I think we're anti-mod, right?
We hate them.
Yeah.
These are jokes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ted.
But, yeah, we do plan to provide modding tools for the community. That won't be until like full release because we wouldn't have the capacity to do it with early access. As far as like incorporating those mods, maybe we'll have to see and obviously talk with modders and stuff. It'll be an ongoing process, but as long as something helps improve the game, like we're all for it. Maybe even if we're just like highlighting stuff like that
I feel like a significant chunk of our current development team were modders.
Decent bit, not too many, but
Yeah,
at least
but they definitely make their feelings known.
Yeah, most people have like dabbled in modding to some degree at least. So.
Yeah. And just as lead design, one of the things that as we're developing the systems, I am keeping modders in mind in the sense that I'm making a game system. Obviously, I'm also making it in such a way that it will be easy for modders to conceptually understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, so that they can make more effective mods built off of it. Right? We don't want to hide the engine or hide the reasons why we're doing things behind cloaks and stuff like that. We want it to be and transparent in the sense that people can easily understand why we have done things the way we have, and the variables are open for people just to grab on and build system off of. Right? We are keeping that in mind. Modders is part of the design philosophy that they will be. Say what we want, but we all know that a lot of people are going to mod this game at some point. Like modders are going to be a big part of. There's going to be a whole community around it. As lead design, I am keeping that in mind as I'm building things out, allowing for people to actually hook into it, things easier. So,
being mod friendly, like we had like pillars of what we're trying to do with this game that's similar to Daggerfall, and probably the one pillar that we added that was not similar to Daggerfall is being mod friendly. So that's been the discussion the whole time.
For sure. I think we actually had our lead programmer kind of go into the chat too. We'll try to release modding tools. That is basically a set of tools we use to make the systems ourselves. More on this later. So, we've got one question I think kind of ties into this. I'm not sure I fully understand this question, but maybe one of you will understand it better than I do. Have you considered creating or allowing access to a scenario creation tool and allow these scenarios in the game? Example, Super Mario Maker.
I can grab that. I mean, that'll be very similar to the creation tools that we were talking about earlier. In terms of like scenario makers, I believe there'll be like quest design stuff like that. The answer will be yes. I mean, our plan will be when we open up this thing to modders, it'll be very open to modders, right? We don't want to lock off certain corners to the game. In theory, you can poke at all of it. I don't know how well you can poke at it. Maybe there might be a special sauce that maybe conceptual that we can get. But again, like I said, as lead design, the idea would be that as we're designing it, modders are being kept in mind in the sense that when we hand it to the community, there'll be enough there for people to actually carry it forward in whatever direction they want to take it. So,
yeah. I feel like we may have covered this one a bit, but I'll go over it quickly just for review. We've got a question from Jacob. How far can you raise in terms of social status? Can you gain a position of guild master? Can you be a town mayor or a lord with a castle or even the ruler of a kingdom?
No, yeah, we had touched on it before, but you can climb ranks in factions, but you're not going to be in a leadership position in those factions. So, like, you can sort of rise to some prestige, but it won't be an administrative position at any point, because you're still an adventurer, and we want the player to be able to go out and adventure, and it's not a simulation of administrative duties.
That'll be a great game mechanic, by the way.
Yeah, just sit down at a desk all day and file paperwork.
Yeah,
Essentially,
just moving paper. Click the piece of paper, drag it to the finished box, and
it's a work
guys are
simulator at
laughing.
that point.
I was saying you guys are laughing, but when I first joined Bethesda, they had a series of games called Hockey League Simulator, where you were not playing hockey. You were the guy who was like coordinating, like your whole team, and like, like basically being the business manager for your team. And I was like, what the fuck? And but it was like they sold a couple copies, so like there's a world in which people like that.
Oh
But
yeah,
I
no, not
don't
gonna.
get it.
Yeah, not gonna knock that. Not gonna knock people who like that. But that's not the intention for this particular.
No,
you're
my
centered
God, my
as an adventure.
God, no! Don't make me make that game.
There are tons of work simulators out there that people love. That's just not what this game is necessarily going to be.
Oh my God, I hope not.
We've got an interesting one from Kirith. How do you make large swaths of terrain interesting to traverse? So I feel like a lot of big open worlds, you just have to hold W for half an hour between combats, but I think a great big open world would make the hiking interesting, itself interesting. Do you guys have a plan to make hiking interesting, like just the act of crossing terrain, or will the game lean more on fast travel and the miles of space in between are more like a backdrop?
Yeah. Well, I think I do want to like differentiate between sort of these two styles that are always kind of brought up, which is something that's more like a simulation of a real big giant world, which is sort of what we're going after, as opposed to like the more theme park world design of more modern games. And that the theme park one is just like you always have to engage the player with something. There's always an enemy attacking you, or there's something just off in the distance to see. And obviously, we do still want that sort of engagement with the player. We want you to explore. We want you to be rewarded by exploring. But we feel also like it doesn't have to be just a constant barrage of experiences to the players. Sometimes just riding your horse through the forest, like that can be very engaging and very lovely. Especially with Eric's soundtrack playing in the background. So we do think like there's moments for that as well. But then also with our proc-gen systems, we can drop points of interest here and there for the player to interact with. Not to mention things like you see nowadays a lot, like random encounters that players run into. Obviously, there's some great Daggerfall Unity mods like that you can run into, like traveling merchants and things like that. So it's all things we have planned, and that can be both in the fast travel system that you come across. Your travel will get interrupted, and you come across one of these encounters, or you're just out there in the world and they spawn in and head towards you.
Yeah, very nice.
Nicholas, you want to expand on any of that?
No, you kind of nailed it on the head, right? It's about there's this big space in how we fill it, right? And we definitely don't want to lean into it being just a theme park where like the next attraction is just within line of sight, right? We want to also have like you don't get a sense of a massive world without having a massive world, right? There has to be empty to appreciate the fill, right? Like you cannot really appreciate the places you're going, which are going to be complex, and we're going to have a lot of interesting dungeons and NPCs to talk to, without having breathing space in between, right? We're working on a fast traveling system that allows us allows you to use it to travel the world as you see fit, like you just don't go to point of interest. You can actually just drop in the middle of nowhere and just take in the scenery, or just manually walk it yourself, or a little bit of a blend in between, right? We want to have we want to be able to have that breathing room, literal breathing room between places that one you can just travel and explore and experience, just a nice little walking simulator, which would be nice. And it also, because it won't emphasize the actual places you hit, right? And also it also gives us lots of space to have encounters in, like Victor was talking about. So having random encounters appear, both combat, non-combat, scale related. I mean, there's more than just attacking people in the woods. We can have other experiences as well, right? And you can't get that without having that open space to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, and we're certainly not knocking those theme park style worlds. Like, there's definitely, they're very popular, right? But with that, there's a lot of games do that already. We want to do something different. We want to have that more of a simulated, massive world.
Why aren't we knocking them?
I own like multiple copies of some of them, Ted, so I can't really knock them. It would be a bit hypocrite.
That's right.
Yeah.
Fair.
Bought it multiple times. We've got a question from Plexel, I think is how you pronounce that one. But how will killing NPCs work? And I think specifically, the question is more along like, can you kill anyone? And if you kill an essential NPC, is there some sort of alternative route that happens, or what kind of failsafe is there?
I don't think we have any essential NPCs.
I was gonna say, for how does killing NPCs work? You just hit them on the head with a big stick until they fall.
Right.
Yeah. You stick them with the pointy end. But to the crux of the question, yes. The idea, like Ted was said, there is no essential NPC. You're not gonna, even if you do kill someone who's important, you're not gonna go pop up saying, "Oh, you screwed up your own timeline. Good job," right? The idea of our quest system is to allow for players to, again, make mistakes, explore, right? If you kill the king, you'll be dead, and then interesting things will start happening, and that'll be very engaging, right? You could, in theory, perform a quest and return, and the quest would have failed because the person you're returning it to.
Well, the king has errors at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
So
exactly. No, but I'm saying, like, the killing of the king means cool things start to happen because now the king's dead, and suddenly you have this whole political turmoil that you just set off with a blade, right? But the idea would be that the questing system will be designed in such a way that it will allow for fault tolerance, in the sense that things can happen, fails can happen.
I mean, that would be amazingly, like, you really have to cheat the system to be an early, game player and kill the king.
No, I know. I'm sure there's going to be like speedrun, kill king.
Oh yeah,
speedrun. Yeah.
I know.
What percent of the game? Kill king. That's the percent of the game. I can.
Sure.
For sure.
But
again,
part of the future, somebody just took Ted's clip of that and then has their video of speedrunning that.
going for it. But the idea would be that there are no essential NPCs. If an NPC dies related to a quest, in theory, the intention of design is that either another person can pick up, like, oh, you don't hand it into this guy, you hand it into his wife, the reward or whatever, right? Simple things like that, to things where the person dying is impetus or a momentum to start something new, interesting in the storyline, right? Again, there is no failure, there is failing forward. There's consequences, not fail states. Could be one way of saying it.
Yeah, I actually wanted to comment on that, because Inquisitor Duncan was saying in the chat, very happy that the game will let you fail. Good move, dev team. And it's funny because, like, I've gotten after both designers and writers before for using the word fail or fail state. And it's like, we don't have fail states. We've got, consequences, and that's it, right? It's like, in real life, if I was taking my money to go deposit in the bank and I got robbed along the way, I didn't fail taking my money to the bank. Something else happened. Now I got to deal with that. And that's kind of the philosophy that we're approaching things with.
Well, this kind of ties into the killing NPCs question too, but is a little bit more interesting in the fact of, will it be possible to eradicate an entire city or region and replace the population with goblins? Clearly the best race.
I mean,
well, first of all, you're not wrong about goblins.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. In theory, no. In reality, good luck. Again, because it's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting goal, because there's, I don't think it will be violated in terms of what we're designing. It will just be incredibly hard, because there's going to be a lot, like, when you create that void of entire cities, there's a lot of, like, factions that become involved with that. You touch a lot of factions when you exterminate a city that now don't like you and want to mess with your plans, and two, once you have a void, you want to fill it, right? So hopefully the game will be designed in such a way that we'll want to fill that void up. But we definitely have ideas of how things get refilled, they're repopulated, right? That's part of, like, dungeon design, for example. Like, if you clear a dungeon, there is design in place to be repopulated. We just extend that out, right? I don't know if you get your perfect goblin super state. We'll see how that works out. But in theory, I want to see you try, is what I'll say.
Gitnamo does kind of point on that in the chat, where keep in mind you're fighting cities that are fully populated, so you're not fighting like 100, you're fighting thousands or tens of thousands in that way too.
Yeah.
Which
and they'll also run away as well, right? If they're not a fighter, they're not just going to hang around for you to stab them. They'll be running for it.
This is a fun one. What kind of inspiration has there been for the Wayward Realms? What other media, games, movies, books are you guys drawn on for inspiration?
I guess we just want to go like down the line for each of us and list some of the inspirations.
Sure.
Well, I guess for me, as far as like the narrative side, definitely all the big fantasy properties. Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, my favorite Robert E. Howard's Conan stories. Gameplay wise, obviously Elder Scrolls, very much up there. But other, the major RPGs like Dragon Age. I'm going blank now on names of stuff. Outward, which was mentioned earlier, is actually one that I liked a lot as well. Definitely like some of the stuff that they were doing, and it's kind of just like that. Like, what can we take that's outside of the box that these games are doing, as opposed to like all the mainstream stuff that we see in every game. Michael, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I guess I'll pick up. I'll pick up more on like the mechanical level. Obviously, all that stuff as well. For video games myself, Baldur's Gate, the original Baldur's Gate series would be pretty big for me. I just want to add that to the list because it's a very, in some ways similar, some ways different, but like a really grounded world that you can like really crawl around with, right, and explore stuff. Not to the same scope, but definitely to the same vibe. In terms of mechanics, I am very much a tabletop role playing game type of guy. Arguably, you can even argue my life is more about playing tabletop role playing games and playing video games in some respect, right? So obviously, Dungeon and Dragon systems, but I mean, I follow a whole bunch of weird small scale systems and kind of newer developments in the role playing game spheres in terms of mechanics and systems and stuff like that. So things draw in from there as well. I can rattle off what's on my shelf like Starforged, Dungeon Crawl Classics, Mothership I just picked up recently. I have a Dark Sun box kit lying around as well. Just interesting mechanics, interesting ways of how players can engage with systems, right? And how those systems can reward the player for doing certain things. So that's kind of part of my perspective as well.
And I'm not sure if we have Ted or he stepped away.
Ted, are you available to share some of your inspirations for the game?
Sorry, I had to go to the bathroom.
You made it back just in time.
Yeah. So what is the question?
The question is, what are some of your inspirations for the game? So what media, movies, books, all those good things have you drawn from?
No, I think a big part of our conversations with writers was to take your favorite books and take your favorite movies and see if we can work in our world. And, that's a question for like quests and stuff like that. So, I mean, my God, it's like the list is like hundreds long of like people want to do. Hey, I want to do a Casablanca type storyline, or I want to do a storyline that's based on, I don't know, when Harry met Sally or whatever. Like, like that is part of the thing. Is like we'll steal from anyone.
So true. Gotta get inspiration from everywhere.
I'm looking forward to that You Got Mail quest line.
I haven't seen that yet, but yeah, like you got mail, but it's like a like a courier who's delivering notes to a tavern and that kind of thing.
This is a great question. I know we saw this one on Kickstarter quite a bit too, from Redacted. Will the game be available on consoles? I know that's a big one.
Hopefully in the future.
Eventually.
Yeah. It's something we all really want, but we got to concentrate on, the task at hand first, which is building this thing for PC, and then we can explore those options.
Oh, we're definitely, anticipating that, and it's really easy with Unreal Engine to send it over. We need to make sure that the that it works. So
Question from Do Leaves. Will there be a difficulty setting that can be changed during gameplay? Similar to other Elder Scrolls games, will this only be able to be selected at the start of the game? Will there be difficulty settings at all?
Michael, you want to take that one?
I guess that's me. Yeah. I haven't. Our thoughts about like difficulty in gameplay is like one of the ideas is to tie it deeply into character generation. In the sense that for Daggerfall, for example, you had like your advantages, disadvantages, taking that and cranking that up to 11. In the sense, like for example, again, this is being played with. This isn't like a promise, right? I just want to make that clear. But for example, tying in things like hardcore mode into the character gen. So as you're generating your character, you say, I want this to be hardcore mode. If I die, I die. And that gives you more resources or more points throughout the rest of the character gen, right? You can take on harder things. And the idea would be tying difficulty in more contextually to your character generation, to the world that you're entering. Making and then giving rewards to it, right? Because if you make it harder, you should then have more points to then make your character more strong, right? Like just a bit of that do off. So that's one way we've been thinking about it in terms of like just the difficulty slider. It definitely has come up. It's not hard to implement, but we were thinking something a little more deeper built into character gen as being the kind of like the go-to, like the main thrust of how we think about difficulty, and having more like, for example, hardcore mode's example, but other examples like that, other things you can think about, like contextual difficulty being built in as a feature, not necessarily just a slide bar or setting you can turn on, turn off.
Yeah, I will say I really liked what Starfield did recently, where they added in a whole bunch of like different options you could have, like merchants have more gold or stuff like that, and you could tweak that higher or lower, and then you would get XP increases or decreases depending on what that was and how far you set it.
oh, shout out to Starfield.
There we go. Yeah. I was thinking about something like that too, having it more contextual difficulty, right? Like more than just making it more difficult or more easy. Like how your hit points, enemy hit points, like you say, a resource availability, right? Like things like that. Being it more of the number of enemies, right? You can, if you have a lot of like really easy enemies, that could be just as hard as one really tough enemy, right? So balancing stuff like that, right? So I like the idea. I'll actually should look into that. I didn't realize they did that there, Victor. I'll look into that actually. That's good to know.
Yeah, very nice. We've got like two more feature questions I'd like to try to get through, and then we've got just one fun one that maybe we'll end off on. But one of the feature questions is from Todd. Any news on cooking or alchemy? Anything we can say about those?
From Todd?
Yeah, Inquisitor Todd. He's in our chat all the
time. just wanted to check.
No, wrong Todd. Any updates on alchemy or cooking?
Alchemy, definitely not, since that's not going to be an early access thing. That's going to come in a little later. So we haven't really fleshed out the system much. And similar thing for cooking, but we do like plan for the food to be able to have different advantages for you, like the stamina replenishes more quickly, or your health, because again, different bar from like the health and guard. When you take actual health damage, that's a big deal. So something like just eating well, that is going to help that regenerate faster.
Yeah, and we definitely want to be more than just like, oh, I am wounded, I eat 50 pieces of chicken and I'm feeling great, right? Like something a little bit more like Victor was saying, more leaned in towards if you're engaging in that behavior, you're getting little buffs that build up over time. If you're not engaged in that behavior, you don't care about food, you just don't even have it, or just have the minimum engagement with it, that's totally fine, right? You can focus in other places.
Kyle, one of our other producers, says going to add food coma debuff for maximum realism, which I like.
There we go. Yeah,
that's the Thanksgiving edition.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, if you eat turkey.
That's right.
Yeah, specifically turkey. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When it comes to skills, will there be some sort of skill tree besides points to put into like archery, sorcery, attributes, those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think that's me, Victor. So for where's that question? Right there. Yeah, so no skill tree. The idea is that it's the basic idea is like we want we want players to get rewards for engaging with the world in different ways, right? So the idea is that you're going to be leveling your skills as you engage in the world. That's your main way of growing as a character is via skills. And in terms of I don't know how much really to say about it, but the idea would be like as you're engaged in specific types. So, for example, lockpicking. If you're picking certain types of locks, your proficiency in certain aspects become better, right? We want it really grounded in the sense that as you're doing specific things, engaging these skills in specific ways and against specific things, you are growing specifically, right? That's kind of the main way we want that to go. So it's not going to be less of a conscious or like master plan set up. Like I'm going to sit back, look at my character's growth for the next 50 levels and perfectly plan it out, if that makes sense. It's going to be a more to the lines of as I'm engaging in the world, I'm growing specifically with my engagement. That's kind of the way we want to lean into that. So, but again, that'll be there for most systems. Most systems are going to be we want depth in things, and we want those systems as you're growing your skills to be relevant to cool things that you can do in the world, obviously, not just a flat number that just adds math to stuff. So,
yeah, for sure. All right, we are at time. I'm going to finish off with one really fun question for everyone. This is from Inquisitor Todd again. What's everyone's go-to karaoke song? This is the most important question of this AMA.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
oh yeah, that's good.
I'll go
Because
with
I can't
California
do any of the notes. So I'm just going to flail.
California Dreaming is my answer.
Oh, it's such a good one too, man.
But that is weird because that's like a song with like a bunch of people singing together.
Exactly. Group karaoke activity.
It's like Beach Boys.
I think Victor's plan is he brings in somebody else and just puts the attention on him.
He's gonna downplay just in the back. Yeah.
I have actually sang California Dreaming karaoke before. This is a real thing that happened, so therefore, that's my answer.
It does.
I guess me, eh? I don't know, Freebird. I don't know. I don't really do lots of karaoke.
I don't either.
What do you think you could sing? And Victoria, this is on you too.
I'm like a 90s kid at heart, so it's gonna be like I don't know, in late 90s, early 2000s. It's gonna be like Britney Spears or something like that.
Oh no, sorry. No, I take mine back. Thriller. I claim Thriller.
Thriller? Is that what you said? Yeah.
That is a really high song to sing.
Yeah, man. You got to shoot high. Shoot for the
stars. Yep. That's what I was saying. Like Bohemian Rhapsody. Like give myself a big challenge.
Fantastic. Punch in the comments at Beach Boy. All right, you guys, we are ending it here. If you were not able to watch the live stream or you didn't watch as much of it as you really wanted to, anything like that, we are going to be posting this on our YouTube channel. I'll be sure to share that as soon as it's live. I've got to get the recording first. It'll probably go out sometime tomorrow, most likely. And then we'll probably be sharing some short clips of it and everything, just as a part of our content throughout the next month or so. We do appreciate you guys being here. I'm sorry we didn't get through all the questions. There were so many, but we do appreciate you guys being here and asking so many questions and just being on this journey with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Also, hang around, ask questions in the Wayward Realms channel here on Discord. We're always in there answering stuff, so
yep,
you can still get an answer.
Yep, for sure. All right.
Hey,
any
guys.
final buys before we end?
Quick shout out to our mods for getting all the questions and stuff on the sheet. That's always incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
You guys rock.
Yes, absolutely. Special thanks to Bella and Crab for you guys really helping to organize some of these questions as well. Made my life a little bit easier for sure. Thank you.
And our mods do an amazing job of keeping the Nazi level to a low.
Yeah, that's right. All right. We will sign off here. Thank you all so much for being here today, and we will catch you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.